What up? All right, this is part 2 of our human environment interactions page. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to walk through this slideshow here with you, talking about a few different things. You're just going to need your pencil and be out on page 415. We're going to be writing down just a few different items here. So what we're talking about is the interaction between humans and our environment and how we change each other, right? So what we're going to do here is look at a few photos, and we're going to either agree or disagree, and we need to make sure that we justify our answers here. So in this first example, it says, I would like to live here. And if you look at this place, it does look really nice, really blue, but if you think about it, I don't really see any roads, and it's a bunch of water, and even though the water is really pretty, it might be kind of hard to get around places. So you might disagree, or maybe you do agree because you just want to live there for the beauty of it, but make sure that you're really justifying your answers. So if we look at the first one here, I would like to live here. Go ahead and write down in number 1, do you agree or disagree? Mr. A disagrees because it looks like the climate is very hot, dry, and not much vegetation. And I enjoy forests, but maybe you agree for another reason. On the second one here, I would like to live here. Agree or disagree, and why? For this one, Mr. A definitely agrees. Tropical paradise, hello. Mr. A loves the oceans and sandy beaches. And even though it doesn't look like there's a lot going on in terms of stores or places, it just looks like an environment that I would really like to live in because of the climate. I would like to live here. Agree or disagree? Well, in this one, even though it's pretty colorful, Mr. A is going to have to disagree because I'm not much of a big city person, and this kind of looks like a concrete jungle. I don't really see any trees or any sort of vegetation. Looks pretty hot as the young men there are in some tank tops, and I just don't know if that would be the place for me. What about this one? Would you like to live here? Agree or disagree? Well, in this case, I'm going to have to disagree because even though it looks like there's a lot of stores and a lot of things to do, I love nature and wildlife, and the busy, crowded life is just not for me. Looks like there's some trash on the street, and I just don't know if that's the kind of environment that I would like to live in. And the last one here, would you like to live here? Agree or disagree? See, for this one too, I'm going to have to disagree. Even though it looks like a tropical weather, the modifications that the humans made do not appear very appeasing. We can see that it looks sort of like a lean-to shack, and there's lots of trash and things everywhere, so I'm going to have to disagree on this one. So the whole point of this part here was to really think about the environment and whether or not it would be a place that you would like to live in, because the environment does affect our living situations. So what we're going to do here next is take a look at some vocabulary words, and we're going to be writing down the word, and then it's giving us the definition. So what we're going to do is we're going to think here, how might climate and geography affect the type of housing people build? How might climate and geography affect the type of clothing people wear? And how might climate and geography affect what people do for fun? So we're going to fill in this vocabulary sheet as we go. The first one, human-environment interactions, the impact people and nature have on each other, how people react or change to the earth. So as you can see here, building Machu Picchu in the mountains down in Lima, Peru, having wind turbines to help provide sources of electricity, or simply natural disasters in the way that the environment affects humans. So on this first line here, we're going to write human environment interactions. Moving on to the second one here, geographic factors, the natural features of a place such as landforms, vegetation, or climate. So on your second line there, you are writing geographic factors. These are things such as mountains or deserts or crops or farmland. All of those sorts of things can affect human interactions. So if we look here at some geographic factors of Indonesia, how might people interact with this type of natural environment? Well, we can see a volcano on this side, so a way to interact with that environment is to probably not interact with it at all, to get as far away from it as you can, whereas this one would be more of a relaxing environment and trying to keep it clean and fresh so that way people can enjoy its beauty. Moving on to the third one here, altitude or elevation. So on that third line, writing altitude or elevation, this is another word for vertical distance above the Earth's surface. The higher the elevation, the colder the climate. So if we were to live on the Rocky Mountains or the Appalachian Mountains, if we see really high up to the top, it's called the death zone, where oxygen concentration at this altitude is so low your cells do not have enough oxygen to build new tissue. Your body will continually wither away until death. Wow, that sounds very exciting. So maybe not interacting with the high part of a mountain and just not living in that area. Yeah, probably not ever. Whereas if we look down here at the bottom, a high altitude, this is where we begin to see in some individuals, it generally begins with headaches and an altered night vision. So living in the mountains, probably not the best way. We don't really want a high altitude. Number 4, physical processes. So on number 4, please go ahead and write down physical processes. These are changes in the land's features caused by the Earth itself, such as tsunamis, earthquakes, or erosions. So these are things that the Earth does to us. And if we can look at some effects of physical processes, we can see how earthquakes can rupture certain farmlands or devastate cities and homes. People lose their lives, those sorts of things. So these physical processes are basically just another word for natural disasters, things that happen that we can't really control. Next, geographic barriers, any natural feature that isolates a region or makes movement to a place very difficult. So down here on number 5, if you'll go ahead and write geographic barriers. So these could be anything from mountain ranges to volcanoes to the Grand Canyon to serpent mounds, or lots of different things that can affect where we can travel. So Ohio, Indiana, Illinois really don't have a lot of geographic barriers. It's very flat. Whereas if we were to go more east to the mountains, there's much more barriers there. And if we look at the next one, number 6, down there on that line, if you'll go ahead and write human factors. Human factors are ways that humans affect the environment, such as extracting natural resources, making transportation routes, and building urban areas. So if you can look at this one, this was all dug out by humans to get rock and gravel for asphalt and sidewalks. And as you can see here, those are a bunch of cars. Can you imagine that kind of traffic? I think traffic is crazy just going to Dublin at 5 o'clock, but look at all those cars. That's insane. I would be absolutely irate. But human factors are ways that we affect the environment by doing things to it. So if you look here at Mexico City, which used to be a place of tropical rainforests and environments, you can see all urban areas. We have lots of skyscrapers and buildings, we have subways, we have temples and things like that. So people have interacted with this environment and pretty much destroying it and making it for human life. So then on our next one here, adaptations, number 7, we're gonna go ahead and write adaptations, adjustments people make in their lives to better fit an environment. So living in Florida, probably boarding up your windows, living near the coast, putting your house on stilts, wearing an umbrella, those sorts of things are ways that we adapt. And last but not least, modifications, changes people make to a natural environment to meet their needs, like farming, building transportation routes, bridges, those sorts of things. Down here on the last one, it kind of got cut off and put on the back, so if you'll go ahead and write the definition and the word, modifications equal changes people make to the environment to meet their needs. So the biggest thing that I want you to walk away from all these vocabulary words are basically the fact that the environment can affect humans, right? Things in our environment affect us, whether from natural disasters or landforms or climate, whatever it may be, it affects the way that we live. And we either adapt to it, not changing it, but just changing the way that we live to suit our environment, or we modify it to make the environment meet our needs, which can be positive and also negative. We're going to take a look at a couple of examples here about how technology enables us to adapt and modify the physical environment. So if you can look at this one, adaptation or modification. Well, it's hard to tell, but those people are actually standing on sticks and fishing. So I would say that's an adaptation because they're not really modifying the environment, they're just adapting for a better way to fish. If you look at this one, pretty awesome, solar panels right on top of the house. I'd say that that would be an adaptation. They're adapting to the sun's direct rays right there and using it for electricity. Having a thermostat, definitely an adaptation, right? Because they are thinking about, well, it's really, really hot outside, so I'm gonna turn the temperature down to 68, so it's much, much cooler in here, not really affecting that environment. A tunnel through the middle of a mountain. Well, I don't know if that's really an adaptation. You're pretty much modifying the mountain and being able to drive through it. So modifying the environment to meet our needs are like bridges and things that affect it around us. This one you can see in an African culture they have a really, really tough situation with not a lot of water, and so they're just adapting to what they've got and using the water around them. These cute little Eskimo kids, look how fluffy they are. Oh my goodness, I just want to pet them. I'd definitely say that's an adaptation. They're adapting to that super cold weather. All right, last but not least, we're gonna turn the page to page 15 here, and I want you to go ahead and take some time to see if you can get these next 10 correct. All right, let's see how you did. Please make sure that you either check mark if you got them correct or just put an X and fix them if you missed them. So loose, lightweight clothing is worn in tropical areas. Well, that would be an adaptation because you're not really doing anything to change the environment. You're just adapting to it to better meet your own needs. Houses are built on stilts in the case of flooding. Well, that's also an adaptation because your house is already there, and so you're just putting it up on stilts because it's a flooded area. You're not really changing the environment to stop the flooding. You're just letting it happen and surviving it. Emissions from factories pollute the atmosphere. Definitely a modification, and not one for the better either. Dams create hydroelectric power. Also a modification because you're changing the way that that water moves to make power, and you're modifying the environment. Sand dunes are constructed to protect against high tides. Also a modification because you're changing the land around you to better suit your needs. A person puts up an umbrella to block the sun at the beach. Well, you're just adapting to the weather. You're not really changing anything, but adapting to it. Huts are constructed from mud and gathered palm leaves. Also an adaptation because the mud and the palm leaves are right around you and you're not destroying the environment to build the house. You're just using what the environment gave you. Forests are cleared for farmland. Definitely a modification because you're taking away those trees and the homes for animals. A person boards up their windows when a hurricane is coming. Just an adaptation because, again, you're just protecting what you've already built. And trees are chopped down to build a new neighborhood. Modification. So at this time, I'd like you to go ahead and submit how you did out of 10. You guys are doing great. Keep it up. Human environment interactions.